Yeah, we will be doing a presidential election matchup between two Republican candidates, Donald J. Trump and Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump obviously being the former president of the United States, and Ron DeSantis being the governor of the state of Florida. Now, originally, Trump was easily expected to win in this primary matchup if it was to occur at all. It didn't look like Ron DeSantis was going to challenge Trump, and if this was to happen, Trump would probably win by 50, 60 points. However, it seems like that the former president is in a difficult situation now. He is still leading, I would say, but things are not as clear as what we expected it to be originally. So, with that, we'll take into a look at this potential matchup between the former president of the United States and the current governor of Florida. So let's get right into this video. Now, starting with the state of Washington. Washington, I think that Ron DeSantis could have a narrow edge here. This is a more democratic state. It's a state that has a lot of suburban areas that are going to prefer, I think, Ron DeSantis by probably around a likely margin. The state of Oregon is a very progressive state. There's a lot of suburban areas as well that could help Ron DeSantis. But for some of the rural areas in Oregon, which there are quite a few, and one of the districts is pretty much just the rural areas of the state, Trump can also do very well. I'm gonna put this as likely for the governor of the state of Florida. Now, next up is the state of California. Now, California, this is a state where there's a lot of urban areas. Urban voters make up the vast majority of the electorate, and that should help Ron DeSantis end up winning the state. Now, the state of Alaska. Alaska is a very interesting state. There's a lot of religions there. There are pretty much a lot of third party voters there compared to other states. However, this state should go for the former president quite easily as well. Now, for the state of Hawaii, this state is a little bit more tough. Both candidates really don't have much appeal there, but I think that Ron DeSantis just being, I would say, conservative in a different sense, I would say he could do better in the state of Hawaii. Now, Nevada. Nevada's quite a close state, but I think Trump did really well in a lot of the rural areas in 2020 and 2016. I think he can replicate that. I think he'll win the state of Nevada. Now, for the state of Arizona. Arizona, this is a state that Ron DeSantis could do pretty well in the Maricopa area and the Pima area, which is the vast majority of the population. However, Trump could do very well in the densely rural areas that really DeSantis can't do as well in. He can do very well in the rural areas, and although they aren't as much of the population, there's going to be more of those rural voters in a Republican primary. At the end of the day, though, I think Ron DeSantis should be able to win the state of Arizona. Now, to the state of Idaho. Idaho's a really rural state. It's a really conservative state, and I think it would definitely support the former president. Wyoming as well. They pretty much they did not support Liz Cheney, the Republican that was one of the members of the January 6th committee, which was very much against Trump, and they ousted her. They also ousted Liz Cheney for Harry Hageman. So that shows that they do definitely support the former president. Montana is a bit closer because it is a state that Biden lost by 15, not by 50. But still, this is still a state that I think many rural voters could vote for the former president. Now, North Dakota, South Dakota, these are very rural states. These are heavily conservative states that could vote for the former president as well. Now, for the state of Nebraska, I think the at-large vote, the 3rd district, and the 1st district should all go for the former president. Now, the 2nd district is closer, but I think that although this is a suburban area, this might not be the area that Ron DeSantis can appeal to, because this is indeed in the Central America. This is in the Great Plains, and Ron DeSantis is from the southern state of Florida. So that should give Trump the district. Utah as well, a very conservative state. Although Mitt Romney and Mike Lee are from the state, those are not necessarily the most conservative senators. Trump should still be able to win. Now the state of Kansas. Kansas has a lot of suburban voters that have made the state close on the presidential level. However, most of the Republican voters registered there would actually vote in the rural parts of the state. So this would be a likely state for Donald Trump. Now, Colorado here, this is a very progressive state. I don't think either party can actually do well. I think it's actually possible that Trump end up winning the state because the voters that turn out are likely going to be voters in much of the rural areas, and that could help the former president. I don't think the same can be said for the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, there's a lot of Hispanic voters, and I think Ron DeSantis could do better with those minority voters and end up winning the state. Now, many of the Hispanic voters are going to vote in the Democratic primary instead of the Republican one, but I still think that Ron DeSantis has the appeal there more than former President Donald J. Trump. Now for the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma, it's a very rural state, very conservative state. Should go for Donald Trump. Now Texas. Texas, many Republicans have now changed their affiliation to Democrats, which would help Trump in a Republican primary, because if they were still in the Republican Party, they would likely not support someone like Trump, but rather someone like DeSantis. But now they have left the Republican primary affiliation. That could help Trump win his primary. So I'm gonna give this state as a state that is tilted for Trump because he can do very, very well in some of the rural areas. Now Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee, these are very, very rural and conservative states, as well as Mississippi, because many of the black voters that could end up voting for DeSantis over Trump, they are registered as Democrats, so they're not going to vote in the primary. And also Mississippi has probably the highest voting rate for Republicans for white voters. Now for the state of Missouri. Missouri, it's obviously also a state that I think Trump can win, definitely more than DeSantis, because there are a lot of voters there that are considered liberals. Though they lose the general elections, there's still a lot of voters in the St. Louis and Kansas City area. However, they are not going to be voting in the Republican primary. They're obviously going to be voting in the Democratic primary, so that should give the state of Missouri, the state of Kentucky, Indiana, as well as to Donald Trump. Now, West Virginia could be closer because they have Senator Joe Manchin, who is a Democrat, suggesting that the state isn't as far right. And also, a lot of blue dogs are registered in the state of West Virginia. For that reason, I'm also going to make Kentucky likely. West Virginia, I'll put it as the lean state because, again, there's a lot of blue dogs. Now, Iowa and Ohio, these are states that Trump did incredibly well in 2020. That shows that he should be very strong in those states in their primary performances. Now for the state of Illinois. Illinois, there's a lot of rural areas, but there's also a lot of suburban areas. The rural area is likely going to prefer Trump. The suburban area is going to vote for DeSantis. But the problem for him in the state of Illinois is that Cook County is the largest population center, and Ron DeSantis should be able to net some votes in the GOP primary there. But most of them are definitely registered as Democrats, so the state could be really close, but I think Ron DeSantis could still edge it out pretty narrowly. Now for the state of Minnesota, there's a lot of rural areas as well, but there's also more liberal areas in the Minneapolis suburbs, but again, those are very, very, I would say very, very liberal areas. Those areas are affiliated with Democrats. So I'm gonna give the state to the current governor of the state of Florida, which would be Ron DeSantis. Now, Wisconsin, though, I think Trump could win the state because he did very, very well there in 2020 and 2016. He won the state in 2016, he lost it nearly in 2020. But again, typical Republicans don't do nearly as well as he did in the state. Now for the state of Michigan. Michigan's, I would say, a relatively close state. It is a pretty diverse state. We have some really urban areas, we have Democratic and Republican trending suburban areas, and we have some rural areas. Now, I think Trump could actually do really well in a primary in the state of Michigan, just because of the fact that there's a lot of rural areas that he can appeal particularly well to, so that should help him win the state. However, for the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis' home state, although it's technically also Trump's home state, I just don't think he can win the state. So I'm going to put this as a likely state for Ron DeSantis. Now for the state of Georgia, the neighboring state, although again there's going to be a lot of rural voters, I don't think that's going to be enough to offset a lot of the suburban areas that are going to vote for Ron DeSantis, so I'm going to give it to Ron DeSantis by a lean margin. Now South Carolina is a very rural state, it's a very conservative state, generally speaking, so I'm going to give it to Trump, though it's also a relatively closer state than some of the other great states in the Great Plains. North Carolina, I think I can give this to to Ron DeSantis because I think he is gonna win some of the southern states that are relatively more competitive, as he is still the governor from the state of Florida, which is not that far from North Carolina. Now to say of Pennsylvania here, again, I think Trump's appeal in much of the rural areas and even some of the suburban areas could end up helping him win the state. He also didn't do that poorly in Philadelphia, so that should help him actually pull off the state of Pennsylvania, which puts him at 249 votes in this scenario. But again, some of the other states that are left are going to favor Ron DeSantis because those are more liberal states. Now for the state of Maine, I think the at-large vote should go for Ron DeSantis. Maine's first district is going to be likely for Ron DeSantis. Now, Trump did very well in the second district in 2016 and 2020, so he should win the second district. Now for the state of New York. New York, this is the state that he is from, but it is a more democratic state. I'm not going to touch on it just yet, but Virginia, I think Ron DeSantis could end up winning because this is Tim Kaine's home state, and I think many voters are going to support DeSantis over the former president. Maryland as well, Delaware as well, these are very, very solidly Democratic states, and the District of Columbia, so those areas should vote for Ron DeSantis. I think that DeSantis could win the states of Vermont and New Hampshire probably. There are some conservatives that are going to vote for, I think, Trump, but I think DeSantis is still favored in that state. Now going to the state of New York. New York, I think New York's also going to be close, but Trump is from Manhattan, and pretty much there's not going to be many Republican voters that are going to vote for Trump in areas like Manhattan or Queens County or Bronx, but I think it will be enough for him to win the state. Now that it doesn't really matter anymore because he has crossed the barrier, but again, the primary rules are more complicated. The primary rules suggest that you must win the delegates are going to be split evenly in many states. Some states it's winner take all, some states it's winner takes most, and some states it's proportional. So it's quite complicated. I'm just not going to touch it on here, but I think Ron DeSantis should be able to win the rest of the Democratic leaning states. So the map is going to be 278 to 260 in favor of Ron DeSantis. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.